Hey everyone, happy October. It's cold and flu season again out there, and COVID is still a thing, so if you're not already vaccinated, please go and get a flu shot and or a COVID shot. Ask your pharmacist or your doctor about the recent COVID strains. Bruce is a bit under the weather, not COVID, but he's also suffering a bit of a flu, so he's taking a rest, and I'm going to give you an extra long episode this week of the wildest out there MAGA Women of the Week. Rosanne is still on our list. This week, the QAnon Queen of Conspiracies donned a terry cloth bathrobe and turban, which she claimed to be Chanel, wearing red lipstick and sunglasses with red rims for some reason, while drinking wine, as she and her son basked in the afterglow of their recent intellectual episode. They had an interview with a fellow from the Flat Earth Society.
Yeah, there's one comment one day where someone's like, it wasn't even on our podcast, it was on somebody else's, and they're like,
it was in my head when I looked at you, and I gotta pretend someone else said it, because if I say what I'm thinking, Mom, you'll kick me out.
They were talking about you in the clip, and the guy's like, I love tuning into that wild, insane podcast. Rosanne, you have lipstick on your teeth.
Oh.
Just leave it, fuck it. And I was like, that's exactly what the Rosanne Barr podcast is. It's wild. We did Flat Earth last week. We did Patrick Byrne and election stuff. We got big guests coming up. And using the Flat Earth episode as an example, is like Flat Earth Dave comes on. I'm not a Flat Earther. I don't believe in Flat Earth. But I got to tell you.
I don't know what.
We did a bit of that clip, and you were Flat Earth adjacent, you lazy fuck.
The hell I believe.
That's cool, but I'm just saying that show we did was fascinating from beginning to end.
He had a lot of interesting things to say.
He did, and I was thinking, like, Flat Earth or not, what if there are places on the Earth or in the universe that we don't know about that can be explored? And that got me really excited.
There are. I don't know if you know this, but there are places on the Earth like the bottom of the ocean in a lot of places.
So they were very thrilled with themselves about that. I don't know why the turban and the sunglasses, though. And then now we have a Trump girl from Britain, 21-year-old British woman and Trump fan Maureen Monroe, an influencer with 22,000 followers on Instagram, decided to prove her allegiance to a man she can't even vote for by having his name tattooed on her forehead. Just a month after getting this thing, she claims to be shocked by the backlash and is crowdsourcing to pay for removal surgery that would cost roughly $5,000 US, and has been seen around London holding up a cardboard sign that says, "Need money for tattoo removal." However, she says she's still proud of her Trump tattoo, but is exploring options, and has been getting some second opinions from her therapist about whether to keep it or consider removal. No regrets, just turns out I'm a bad bee. Okay, up next, Michelle Fiore. On Thursday, the Las Vegas, Nevada politician known as Lady Trump was convicted for stealing from a charity meant for a fallen police officer's memorial, and used the funds instead to pay for rent and plastic surgery.
Breaking right now, Michelle Fiore guilty of conspiring to commit wire fraud, as well as 6 other incidents, 6 counts of wire fraud. Thank you for joining us at 4. I'm Kirsten Joyce.
And Brian Loftus, closing arguments, deliberation, and a verdict, all in a matter of hours. 8 News Now investigator Vanessa Murphy was in the courtroom, joins us now live with more info for you. Vanessa.
Certainly a more subdued Michelle Fiore after she learned she was found guilty on all 7 counts. The jury returning the guilty verdict in less than 2 hours. Here's what she had to say.
I'd rather not, because we're still in it. We're still in the thick of things, and my attorney is going to hopefully, apprise you of a lot of situations that you're unaware. You were aware yesterday that I wanted to say a few things to the judge, and I wasn't allowed to. These things are very important, and they're very important because it's information that the jury didn't have.
Prosecutors say she raised money for a statue to remember slain Metro Police Officer Alan Beck, but spent the money on personal expenses, including rent and her daughter's wedding. Defense attorney Michael Sant says he plans on filing an appeal. Fiore remains a free woman. Her sentencing scheduled for January 6th. Attorneys on both sides calling this an unusual case. The government witnesses include business leaders, even the governor. There were twists and turns after her daughter, who is accused of being a co-conspirator, took the stand in her mother's defense. Her testimony then stricken. But again, Michelle Fiore guilty on all 7 counts. Federal prosecutors left the courthouse here a short while ago and declined to comment. Their argument was Fiore used a tragedy to line her pockets.
The funds are meant for the memorial of Officer Alan Beck, who was killed along with 2 other officers by a couple, the Millers, who were anti-government sovereign citizens. Incidentally, Fiore rose to notoriety for her defense of the Bundys in the 2014 Bundy Ranch standoff. And in one of the better justice stories this week, the convicted 68-year-old county clerk of Mesa County, Colorado, an election denier, Tina Peters, was sentenced to 9 years plus 3 probation for assisting an outsider to gain access to the Dominion voting machines. Conan Hayes, a former surfer turned tech wizard, captured sensitive data and county passwords, which later appeared on the Pillow Guy Mike Lindell's podcast. At sentencing, Tina Peters was defiant and contemptuous. She argued with the judge and gave a ridiculous list of reasons why she shouldn't be sent to jail, including the hardship of being deprived of her special magnetic mattress.
Unapologetic election denier in Colorado is facing the consequences from embracing the so-called big lie. Former Mesa County clerk Tina Peters was sentenced to 9 years behind bars yesterday for a data breach scheme inspired by Trump's false claims of voter fraud. She allowed a man affiliated with MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell to misuse a security card to illegally access the county's election system. Before handing down the sentence, the judge in the case ripped into Peters for her blatant lies and taking advantage, he says, of her privileged position.
Your reputation at this point is poor because of what you've done here and after. Your lies are well documented, and these convictions are serious. I'm convinced you would do it all over again if you could. You're as defiant as a defendant as this court has ever seen. You don't have those histories of drug and alcohol abuse. There's no lifetime of trauma, not even close to the type of mitigating circumstances I would see from many folks who sit in that chair. No, to the contrary, Ms. Peters, you are a privileged person. You are as privileged as they come. There are many things in my mind that are crystal clear about this case. You are no hero, you abused your position, and you're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position in office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again. In your world, it's all about you. You abdicated your position as a servant to the Constitution, and you chose you over all else. Yes, you are a charlatan, and you cannot help but lie as easy it is for you to breathe. You betrayed your oath for no one other than you.
Judge Barrett didn't hold back as he read their sentence, calling her a charlatan who abused her position for fame and power and was as defiant and privileged as they come. But our winner of the worst, craziest, and most dangerous MAGA woman this week is MTG, Marjorie Trader Greene, for her 2-sentence offhand tweet about Hurricane Helene, claiming they control the weather and that it's stupid to lie and say it can't be done. And this false and offhand and malicious accusation comes at a time when officials in North Carolina are trying to squash conspiracies and misinformation about the assistance and funding for the storm victims. This is really bad, folks. It's being spread at all levels. These lies about FEMA and Biden and Harris not being there. From Reuters, one of the more far-fetched rumors is that Helene was an engineered storm to allow corporations to mine regional lithium deposits. Others accuse the administration of President Joe Biden of using federal disaster funds to help migrants in the country illegally, or suggest officials are deliberately abandoning bodies in the cleanup. Well, MTG weathered the storm just fine. She left Georgia and was sitting next to her orange daddy at an Alabama college football game. After last week's episode, one of our longtime viewers challenged me to list some extreme Democrat women. So I've gone through a few, and I've chosen the following 4. I hope you'll be satisfied with my choices. I nominate both Jasmine Crockett and Katie Porter for having the audacity to know what the hell they're talking about.
You know, what is wild to me is that this word patriot seems to be getting co-opted for propagandists, because that's what they do. All right, so we're going to talk about what my colleague from Georgia, she talked about misinformation, and I don't know what she was talking about, but nevertheless, we can look at her own tweets and we can find plenty of misinformation, but we're just going to go through one specific tweet. Now, she said that we need to work with Israel to track down the serial numbers on any U.S. weapons used by Hamas against Israel. Dr. Snyder, I may be going out on a limb, but are you aware that that was actually just propaganda that was put out, and there actually were not U.S. weapons that were being used by Hamas, as she attempted to insinuate in this tweet?
Yes, I mean, obviously there what you have is a typical example of American-Russian messaging, where the implicit idea is supposed to be we shouldn't give weapons to Ukraine because they're going to end up going somewhere else. There's no evidence for that. It's hard to think of an example where American weapons have been leveraged with such success as on the Ukrainian battlefield.
Thank you so much. In fact, for some people, especially people that serve on the committee, they may be surprised to know that it's actually a former Russian president and Putin's sidekick, Dmitry, and I don't want to slaughter his name, so I'm going to say Dmitry M., who actually she quote tweeted. See, the problem that we're having, and the reason that we're bringing up Russia as well, is because Russia is a threat as well as China. So we are not going to sit here and pretend as if it's only one or the other. But the biggest problem that we have is we have people that sit in this chamber and they spread the misinformation. If it was left in Russia or China, whatever. But the problem is that you have people that sit in positions of power and they have a $2 million budget. You think that they would call on some staff to find out if they were telling the truth about the things that they're putting on social media, but instead it works for their rhetoric. And as we talk about rhetoric, something else that was appalling to me was this insinuation that when you look at the Ukrainians, which is why we're having problems getting the funding that Ukraine needs, is because people in this chamber push misinformation and disinformation. They want to talk about the Ukrainians got all of these Nazis. Well, let me tell you something. You can find Nazis anywhere. You can find them right here in the United States. In fact, a bunch of the people that they're calling victims and prisoners of war, also known as convicted felons from January 6th. I have an article that I'd like to enter into the record by unanimous consent that says neo-Nazi January 6th rioter pleads guilty.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. So here's the point. We have people in this chamber that are actually causing just as much a threat, if not more of a threat, to our own country. We should be talking about holding our very own accountable for the misinformation and disinformation that they are spreading, whether it's coming out of China, whether it's coming out of Russia, or whoever is peddling it. It is a problem because right now what we see is that people are dying and we cannot get the support that we need from the public because they continue to peddle lies. And I'm tired of it because I didn't come to this chamber to play games. I came to this chamber to answer to the people, the American people, and to make sure that we keep the American people safe.
If I could just, for the record, say I would not take Congresswoman Porter's investment opportunity, because it's investing with other people's money, and it's making choices that they might not themselves want to make with those dollars.
I want to start by talking about other people's money, because last time I checked, that's all we spend is the American people's money. That's actually the function of Congress. And there are no dollars that we spend that do not come from the American people. So the argument that we shouldn't do something because it's spending other people's money would simply suggest that we don't spend any money at all, including zeroing out the defense budget. Is that in fact what you were suggesting, Dr. Burke, that we zero out the defense budget so that we don't spend other people's money?
No, but it is the case that
I'm reclaiming my time.
You are spending other people's money.
Always.
And that those choices need to reflect what most Americans want.
Okay.
Most Americans do not
Reclaiming
want
my time, Mr.
government-funded
Chair.
universal child
Reclaiming
care.
my time. Senator Vance's hypothetical says that one parent might prefer to stay home. That's probably true. There's a lot of statistics that show that parents, men and women, have different preferences at different points in time. But what about the 10 million single moms? Where do they fit? Dr. Burke, where did you put your children in childcare?
Well, I'm not going to bring my children into this hearing, so it doesn't have any bearing on this. So
Dr. Burke, do you have children?
I do.
So I'm sharing my story because my story is one that doesn't get heard in this Congress. Because do you know how many single moms there are?
One or two?
One. Childcare, custodial care to help people who may choose all kinds of different options. I've had full-time care. I've had 3/4 care. I had when I had a spouse, he stayed home some years. That was how we fit the pieces together. But that's what this hearing is about, not jamming one size fits all. But if there isn't the money, there won't be the choice. That's why we see married parents saying they would prefer to stay home because they have the option to stay home. Single parents don't say they'd rather stay home because they couldn't. So our whole perspective here is warped by the fact that this body is so disproportionately unrepresentative of the American people's experience.
And I also nominate Rudy Giuliani's daughter, Carolyn Rose, for speaking out and endorsing Harris after losing her father to Trump, in her own words.
Priscilla's new reporting comes tonight as Giuliani endorses Harris. Caroline Rose Giuliani, that is. She is the daughter of Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, was former President Donald Trump's personal attorney, and breaking publicly from her father now, endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris for president, calling Trump destructive, calamitous, and a dark force. All quotes from Caroline Rose, blaming Trump for destroying her father's life. She writes in Vanity Fair, and I quote from her, "I've been grieving the loss of my dad to Trump. I cannot bear to lose our country to him, too." Caroline Rose Giuliani is out front now. She's a writer, a filmmaker, and obviously the daughter of the former New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. And Caroline Rose, I know this is your first television interview since your endorsement, so I appreciate very much you taking the time. I can only imagine how hard it is for you to have made that decision, to do it publicly. Can you share, what you went through, Caroline Rose? What made you make this decision?
Yeah, it was definitely not a decision I came to lightly. Figuring out how to articulate these feelings with the storm that I've been experiencing over the last couple years, the emotional storm, was really hard. And also figuring out if I had the fortitude to share it, knowing that it could definitely damage my relationship with my dad in the last years of his life was really, really painful. But at a certain point, earlier in this election, I think it all felt kind of surreal when Donald Trump became the candidate. It was like, I can't believe this is really happening after everything that he's done to our country, after being the first president to not participate in the peaceful transfer of power. Like, it didn't feel real. And then, I'm recently engaged. I'm thinking about having children. I very much want to have children. And one day I just thought about what I would say to my children in the future. And in that moment, everything just became incredibly real. Like, I want to live in a country, if I have a little girl, I want her to have autonomy over her body. And if she becomes a boy, I want her to feel safe and respected in this country. And no matter the gender of my children, I want them to live on a planet that's habitable. And I would really also like them to live in a democracy. So the stakes all hit me at once. And I knew I had to use every resource at my disposal to get this message out there.
And finally, I nominate Kamala Harris for flip-flopping, as some would call it, on legalizing pot, which of course triggered Trump into responding.
Kamala Harris is now straight up saying we should legalize. This is the furthest left major party nominee when it comes to cannabis ever. You might claim she flip-flopped and she did change her opinion, and I will talk about that in a moment. But this is Kamala Harris staking out the furthest left position on this issue we've ever seen.
Oh, cannabis?
What are your views on cannabis?
I just feel strongly people should not be going to jail for smoking weed. And we know historically what that has meant and who has gone to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I just think we have come to a point where we have to understand that we need to legalize it and stop criminalizing this behavior. And I've actually, this is not a new position for me. I have felt for a long time we need to legalize it. So that's where I am on that.
Now, what does it mean that she has felt this for a long time? It is absolutely true that there are videos of her being asked, what about legalization? And she said, no, I don't agree with that. And she is getting attacked because she used to have a different position. But she did ultimately come to the correct position. So I'm with you that Kamala Harris had the wrong view on this issue at one point. I mean, yeah, that's true. And she did change her position. But if she hadn't changed her position, the very same people would be saying she's against legalization. Well, do you want her to continue having the wrong position so that you attack her for that? Or do you want her to change her mind to the correct position and then you attack her for changing her mind? Now, Trump is desperate to jump into this. He realizes it's potentially yet another winning issue for Kamala Harris, especially among young people. And so he posted to Truth Social with regard to an amendment in Florida, quote, as I have previously stated, I believe it is time to end needless arrests and incarcerations of adults for small amounts of marijuana for personal use. We must also implement smart regulations while providing access for adults to safe, tested product. As a Floridian, I will be voting yes on Amendment 3 this November. As president, we will continue to focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug and work with Congress to pass common sense laws, including safe banking for state-authorized companies and supporting states' rights to pass marijuana laws like in Florida that work so well for their citizens. So Trump is jumping in and saying, we're going to fix a lot of the littler problems. I'm not for federal legalization, but I want to respect states who decide that that's what they want to do. Even Trump now is being pushed to the left by the fact that Harris is saying, I'm for legalization, period.
So I hope you have all who have stuck around to the end think that I've been fair and giving some extremes from either side. That's our edition of Women of the Week. Fuck Trump.